Story 1. The Thing in the Blossoms. My name's Daniel Morris. I grew up in Eugene, Oregon, a quiet college town where spring was everyone's favorite season. By late March, the streets would explode with pink and white blossoms, and families from all over would come out to take pictures. I used to hate it. Back when I was 17, I couldn't think of anything more embarrassing than standing under a tree, while my mom snapped photos of me, smiling naturally. That year, though, she begged me one last time, said it was the final spring before I'd head off to college, and she wanted at least one memory before I left home for good. I didn't want to go, but for some reason, I gave in. Maybe guilt, maybe pity. The park she chose was one I didn't recognize. It was small, tucked behind a row of suburban houses, and strangely quiet for such a warm April evening. The dirt trail curved between the trees, blossoms falling in slow motion with every breeze. It should have felt peaceful, but the moment I stepped onto that path, I had this sharp, crawling sensation run across the back of my neck. Like the trees weren't just blooming, like they were watching. And then, just a few steps in, I saw it. About 30 feet ahead, between two cherry trees heavy with petals, a figure stood completely motionless. They were facing the trunk of the tree, hood drawn tight over their head. Not moving, not swaying, not doing anything except staring at the bark like the tree itself was whispering something only they could hear. At first, I thought maybe it was just another photographer, but the longer I stared, the more wrong it felt. Their head was tilted far too sharply to the side, at an angle that made my stomach turn. And no camera, no phone, just a grey, oversized hoodie hanging loose over a body that was absolutely still. I should have looked away. I should have ignored it. But the moment I realized the hoodie was moving, just slightly, like something was shifting around inside it, my throat went dry. And then the figure turned its head. Not toward me, not toward anything human. It turned upward, straight into the blossoms above. I froze. My mum was fumbling with her camera a few feet behind me, complaining about the light. I wanted to tell her, but the words got stuck in my throat. The hooded figure's head tilted further back until the face was aimed directly at the branches overhead. And then it stayed there. No movement, no breath. The wind shifted, carrying a faint creaking sound, almost like wood splitting. But it wasn't coming from the trees. It was coming from the figure's neck. "Danny, smile!" my mom called. I tore my eyes away just long enough to force a weak grin. When I looked back, the figure was gone. No sound of footsteps, no movement between the trees, just empty space where they'd been standing seconds before. A single blossom drifted down and landed on my jacket. Except when I brushed it off, it wasn't a blossom. It was a scrap of grey fabric, frayed at the edges, faintly damp like it had been outside all night. I told my mom I wasn't feeling well and begged her to wrap up. She sighed but agreed. On the way back, I couldn't stop scanning the tree line. Every gust of wind made me flinch. As we reached the park exit, I looked over my shoulder one last time, and there it was again. The hooded figure, closer this time. Not between the trees, but standing dead center in the dirt path we had just walked, perfectly still, watching us leave. That night, lying in my bed, I told myself it had to be my imagination. Stress, nerves, maybe a weirdo playing a prank. Around 2 a.m., I woke to a faint scratching sound. At first, I thought it was tree branches against the siding, but when I sat up, I realized the noise was coming from inside my room. I turned on the lamp. Nothing. Then I looked at my window. On the glass, in the thin layer of pollen that had built up over spring, were 5 long streaks, like someone had dragged their fingers slowly, deliberately down the pane. The next day, I kept quiet. Didn't tell my mum, didn't tell anyone. But after school, I walked back to that park. The blossoms had fallen heavier overnight, blanketing the trail in pink and white. It looked beautiful at first, until I noticed the pattern. The petals weren't scattered randomly. They formed a path, a clear, deliberate trail leading off the main dirt path and deeper into the trees. And at the very end of the trail sat the grey hoodie, empty, propped up against the trunk of a tree. My curiosity outweighed my fear just barely. I stepped closer. The hoodie wasn't just empty, it was wrong. The sleeves had been torn wide open, and the inside was hollow. Not like fabric, more like bark. Dry, splintered wood ran through the inside lining, as if the hoodie had grown around it. And sticking out from the hood itself, tangled in the drawstrings, were tiny fragments of blossoms. Not fresh, wilted, brown around the edges. That's when I heard it. The creaking sound again, right behind me. I spun around and looked up. Above me, hanging from the branches, was a face. Human but stretched, the skin sagging unnaturally like it was being pulled down by invisible strings. The mouth opened wide, wider than it should have, and from inside spilled a shower of petals. I stumbled backward, tripping over roots, heart slamming against my chest. The hoodie was gone. I told my parents, I told my friends. Nobody believed me. They laughed, said it was stress before college, said I was just spooking myself. Finally, I went to the Eugene Police Department. I must have sounded insane, talking about hoodies turning into trees and faces spitting petals. But here's the thing. When I finished, the officer at the desk didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. He just asked me one question. Was it blooming season? It's been 6 years since then. I live in Seattle now. Different city, different life. But I still dread spring. 2 nights ago, it happened again. I woke up to the sound of scratching on my window. I told myself it couldn't be. Not here, not now, but when I pulled back the curtain, there it was. A single blossom pressed flat against the glass, and behind it, just visible in the reflection of the street lamp, was a grey hood, tilted back, staring up at the blossoms overhead. Story 2. The Scratch at the Window. My name's Emily Carter. I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, in one of those neighborhoods where every house looked the same. White fences, trimmed lawns, quiet streets. Back then, I shared a room with my little sister, Megan. She was 5 years younger, but brave in ways I wasn't. One summer night when I was 16, we were lying awake in our twin beds when it started. A faint, rhythmic scratching on the window. At first, I thought it was just branches brushing against the glass, except there weren't any trees close enough to reach. Megan whispered, "Do you hear that?" I nodded. The sound continued, slow and deliberate, like fingernails dragging down the pane. Then it stopped. I gathered the courage to roll over and peek. For a moment, I saw nothing but our reflection in the glass. But then, in the faint glow of the streetlight, a hand pressed flat against the outside of the window. Thin, pale. Too many joints in the fingers. And the nails weren't nails. They were sharp, splintered like wood. I screamed. My dad came rushing in. He checked the yard, the roof, everything. Nothing there. He told us it was just our imagination. But the next morning, when sunlight filled the room, I noticed something no one else seemed to. The screen on our bedroom window was gone. Not torn off, not broken. Just gone. As if someone or something had carefully removed it. That night, Megan begged me to switch beds with her. She wanted the one farthest from the window. I agreed. Around 1 a.m., the scratching returned, but louder this time, more insistent. I pulled the blanket over my head, shaking, while Megan whispered, "Don't look, don't look." But curiosity got the better of me. I peeked. The hand was back, and this time a face pressed against the glass beside it. Pale, hollow, eyes completely black, reflecting the street lamp like pools of oil, and it was smiling. The next day, I told my dad again. He got angry, said we were making up stories. To prove it, he took me to the side of the house where our bedroom window faced the yard. That's when we saw it. The grass was flattened, as though someone had been standing there for hours, and just a few feet away, half hidden under the porch, was the small crawl-space door, wide open. That night, I refused to sleep. I sat up in bed, baseball bat clutched in my hands, staring at the window. Around 3 a.m., instead of scratching, I heard something worse. Knock, knock. 2 slow taps against the glass. Megan stirred, whispering my name. I told her not to move. Knock, knock, this time louder. And then, in a voice muffled but clear, from the other side of the glass, "Emily!" I screamed. My parents came running again, furious. My dad yanked open our bedroom door and froze, because from inside the closet across the room came the exact same scratching sound. He opened the door, nothing inside but our clothes. Except the wood paneling at the back had been pried open, leading into darkness, into the crawl space. The next night, Megan disappeared. I woke to the sound of the window sliding open. By the time I sat up, her bed was empty. The curtains were swaying in the night air. I screamed until my throat burned. My parents called the police. They searched the neighborhood, the crawl space, the woods nearby. No trace of her. The only thing they found was the window screen, lying neatly in the middle of the yard. The investigation went nowhere. No fingerprints, no forced entry, nothing. But weeks later, I found something in the crawl space myself. A scrap of paper, yellowed, fragile. It looked decades old. On it, written in shaky handwriting, were just 4 words. It lives in windows. It's been 10 years since Megan vanished. I moved to Denver, changed my life, tried to forget. But 3 nights ago, as I was drifting off to sleep in my apartment, I heard it again. Scratch, scratch. I froze. My bedroom's on the 12th floor. No balconies, no ledges. Nothing should be outside my window. But when I looked, my blood turned to ice. A pale hand was pressed against the glass, and behind it, a face, smiling, whispering my name. Story 3. The Basement Door. When I was 13, my family moved into an old Victorian house in Dayton, Ohio. My parents said it was a fixer-upper, but to me it felt wrong from the start, especially the basement. The door to it was always locked. Dad said the key was lost years ago and we didn't need to go down there anyway. Still, I'd catch him sometimes, just staring at that door for minutes at a time, as if listening. The first week we lived there, I woke up around midnight to a faint thumping. At first, I thought it was pipes. Old houses always made noises, but then I realized the sound was rhythmic, steady, like someone knocking, and it was coming from the basement door. The next night, it happened again. This time, I crept out of my room and padded down the stairs. The house was silent except for that slow, deliberate knocking. I stood in front of the basement door, heart hammering, and then, through the wood, I heard it. A whisper. Too quiet to make out at first. I pressed my ear against the door. It said my name. I told my parents, but they brushed it off. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I started searching the house, in drawers, in boxes, under loose floorboards, and one afternoon, tucked in the back of an upstairs closet, I found it. A rusted, old-fashioned key. The moment I touched it, the air in the house seemed heavier, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. That night I waited until everyone was asleep. My hands shook as I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a slow grinding sound. The door creaked open, releasing a smell of damp earth and rot. A staircase led down into pitch blackness. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind me. The basement was larger than I expected. Stone walls, dirt floor, old furniture draped in rotting sheets. But what froze me was the writing on the far wall. Dozens of names, scratched into the stone, some faded, some fresh, and at the very bottom, my name. I dropped the flashlight. Its beam rolled across the floor, landing on something in the corner. At first, it looked like a bundle of rags. Then it moved. Long, thin arms unfolded. Its face, or what should have been a face, was covered by stretched, pale skin, like wax melted over its features. It began crawling toward me, joints cracking, nails scraping the dirt. And from under the skin, muffled voices whispered my name again and again. I bolted up the stairs, slamming into the basement door. It wouldn't budge. Behind me, the thing dragged itself closer. I could hear its nails carving grooves into the steps. I screamed, pounding the door until my fists bled. Finally, it burst open. My dad stood there, eyes wide. He pulled me through and slammed it shut. For the first time, I saw fear on his face. He didn't yell, didn't ask questions. He just locked the door again and held me until I stopped shaking. Later that night, I overheard my parents arguing in the kitchen. My mom's voice was trembling. "You said it wouldn't happen again." My dad whispered back, "It always happens, every house, every generation." We never spoke about it again. The basement stayed locked. Years later, when I moved out, I promised myself I'd never set foot in that house again. But last week I got a call. My parents had sold the place. A new family had already moved in. And 2 nights ago I got a message on Facebook. It was from a kid who now lives in my old room. The message was just one sentence. "Do you hear the knocking too?"